We're going through some adversity right now. Those were Craig Berube's words after back-to-back losses to the Jackets and Blues, where they were outscored by a combined 11-3. To speak to that, here's Mark Masters. Mark, I love the note you sent out through your crack research staff in Masters Nation that said this is the first time in a decade where the Leafs lost consecutive games by 4 or more goals. So what was the mood like at Leafs practice today after they got booed off the ice?
Crazy. Do you know that this didn't happen at all during their last place season? The mood was fine. Yeah, no one's too down. I mean, we're talking about 2 losses here. It's a long season. I think the energy was high. Craig Berube liked what he got out of this practice. I thought it was interesting. One of the early drills was a battle drill, and we saw Auston Matthews take Morgan Rielly to the ice. Setting the tone there a little bit with some of the energy. So William Nylander last night took responsibility for his role in the loss and that turnover that led to that 4th goal early in the 3rd period by Neighbors, and he was one of the first players on the ice at practice and one of the last. Actually, he was the last to leave, so he was putting in some extra work. So a fine vibe here at this practice despite this adversity, the first real adversity of the Berube era that we're seeing.
All right, Mark, I'm going to throw out a stat for you. Auston Matthews was a -3 in each of the Leafs' last 2 losses. Berube ripped him on the bench last night. Everyone saw it. And he didn't hold back when he was asked about the top line giving up the 3rd goal against the Blues, saying it was lazy hockey. How are Matthews and the others responding to getting called out publicly like that?
Yeah, I asked Matthews about it today. He said, listen, it's hockey. You're going to get yelled at by the coach sometimes. He does not take it personally. I asked Berube, what are you trying to get out of that interaction? Are you just frustrated in that moment and letting off some steam? Are you sending a message to Matthews, the team? He said it's about accountability. It's to the whole team, right? If Matthews makes a mistake and the coach immediately calls him to account for that, the whole team is going to take notice. It's not something we really saw much of, if at all, during previous coaching eras. And frankly, there's not been a lot of games where Matthews has had off nights to the point where the coach would have to rep him. He's usually very responsible defensively, even if the offense isn't coming, which has made these last 2 games really stand out. It's never happened before in his career to be -3 in consecutive games. It rarely happens in 1 game in a season. So, I think they're both handling it the right way. And I think it's probably a good sign that Berube kind of gets that done early in this season and puts a marker out there for the whole team that anyone makes a mistake, they're going to be held to account.
Mark, you've been with this team long enough that you've seen previous coaching regimes call out stars publicly and then backpedal the following day. Certainly, as you said, Berube didn't do that. From what you know about this team, from what you know about the fact they're trying to make a culture change, is this critically important for this group of stars to take it to the next level, to be able to get ripped publicly and then not have their coach apologize for it the next day?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you don't want the coach apologizing for fair criticism. It doesn't, that doesn't make much sense. What you want to see is a response on the ice, right? Like Matthews and Marner, when you look at these last 2 losses, it's those guys. The power play hasn't converted. They're a big part of that. And their line has been on for goals against. And Berube today said that they met, the coaching staff, they met with Matthews and Marner to talk about how things have been way too loose for them recently, and they got to tighten up, and they have to be the ones setting the tone for this group. They're walking into Boston. The Bruins are struggling themselves right now. It's a big game for both teams, the first game since Game 7 of their playoff series, so there's extra emotions involved in that. And Marner today said it, we got to turn this thing around or it's going to get ugly. So they understand the stakes here. They know the pressure is on the big boys to produce and play better for the entire team, and it'll be intriguing to see what sort of response Berube and the Leafs get from their top guys on Saturday in Boston, a building where, they don't have the greatest of memories.
All right, listen, you talked about the power play. I want to follow up on that. The Leafs power play 0 for 3 last night, now 3 for 27 of the season, ranked 27th overall. Brutal given all the talent they've got on that unit. Berube was asked about it, and he said, listen, they're getting too many shots blocked. They're just not seeing it right now. I asked Frankie Corrado what should happen with the power play, and he says he'd like to see split up that top unit, maybe split up Matthews and Marner, put them on 2 separate units. What did you see today at practice? Do you see any changes coming or what's being said about it?
Sorry, Frankie. No changes, no balanced 2 units at practice today. I think a lot of people have been calling for that, right? And it's interesting because, Mark Savard, the assistant coach, the new assistant coach who's overseeing the power play, kind of had individual kind of sessions with some of the top guys on the ice here. And I guess the message from him is the analytics are good. The puck isn't going in, but the analytics are good. We like a lot. I don't think this message is going to be well received in Leaf Station, but that is the messaging right now. And I asked Craig Berube, I said, why have you stuck with the same 4 forwards on that top unit, even as they go through this slump? And he said, because the underlying numbers are good, because he sees progress. He sees progress. Obviously, he knows they have to produce at some point, but he sees progress, so he's continuing to stick with it. They did, in terms of the special teams work today, in terms of the power play work today, they did this drill that Berube seems to like, where they split the ice in half, have both units operating on either side of it, 2 different nets in different areas on the ice. And Matthews was asked about that drill, and he says, I kind of like it, I kind of don't, because the nets aren't in the spot where you usually would have them. So visually, it's kind of weird, but he likes the idea that you're getting quick puck touches, you're moving it faster, and that's what they want to see on the power play. They really want to have more of an attack mentality, get pucks to the net, maybe get a dirty one, and then the floodgates will open. That's the idea, Gino, that they're hoping for, but this isn't just this season. I know Berube, has only just got here, and he's talked about how this unit has performed well in the past. 1 for 21 in the playoffs, and obviously they faded down the stretch last year. They still finished 7th overall, but they were right near the top of the league. And then from the end of February to the end of the regular season, it just wasn't very good. So this has been an issue for a while now. For now, they're sticking with the core 4 approach on the top unit. But, I just don't know how much longer they can stay patient with it.
Come on, Mark. The analytics are good. I love that line. The analytics are good. How does that work?
Gino, it's funny. Gino, I asked Mitch afterwards, he's like, the analytics are good. And I said, what are the analytics saying? He said, I don't know. That's what they're telling me. And he's like, yeah, it feels like we're getting chances. But, Mitch and even Auston, when he was asked about it, he's like, if you're an analytics guy, because I don't think either of those 2 guys are particularly analytics guys. But it was funny. He's like, the analytics are good. He's like, I don't know. They're telling me. So they're trying to pump these guys up. Obviously, it's confidence. It's, it's you want those guys to have a swagger when they're out there on the power play. It's 5 versus 4. They should be snapping the puck around, and obviously right now it's just not happening. So I thought that was a funny interaction, Gino. It's like the players are being told this, but yeah.
I'll tell you who's got great swagger is Anthony Stolarz, and for good reason. He wasn't in net for either of their brutal losses of the Jackets, the Blues. Hasn't given up more than 2 in any one of his 5 starts so far. Now I assume they're going to go back to him for Saturday night in Boston.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. He was the first goalie off. I was talking to him briefly after practice. I was looking at his, game logs and his splits, and I could not find a game against Boston. He's 30 years old in his 7th NHL season, but because he hasn't gotten a run like this previously in his career in the NHL, he hasn't. There's some teams he hasn't played, and he hasn't played Boston. Now, of course, he was part of that Panthers run. He experienced a playoff series win in Boston, just like the head coach and Craig Berube. So he's got some positive memories of in the TD Garden and against the Bruins. But this will be his first actual game against Boston. It's crazy to think that, but yeah. I mean, if you're the Leafs, you're looking for positives. Your best player early in the season wasn't in these last 2 games. You can debate whether he should have been last night in that game against the St. Louis Blues. Not every team would take a red-hot goalie out, but obviously they wanted to get Joseph Woll up and running here. It's still pretty early in the season, and Stolarz isn't used to the workload. But yeah, you get Stolarz back. He's still feeling good. He's not affected by what's just happened here, and you hope that he could just stay in a rhythm. He's been a backup, so he's used to layoffs between games. And this will be a 6th game. He didn't play a 6th game last season until December, so he's way ahead of in terms of his workload from previous seasons. So you got to hope if you're the Leafs, he can just get right back in there, look like he has in the past, and then that's something that can help you get out of this little mini rut they're in.
Hey, Mark, nice checking in with you. I really appreciate it. I always have fun when we have these conversations. Enjoy the road. You guys are heading to Boston Saturday night, then into Winnipeg, where the Jets are off to a perfect 7-0 start to the season. Mark Masters at the Toronto Maple Leafs practice facility.